University of Chicago Public Policy Podcasts.
Hi listeners, welcome back to UC3P. My name is David Raban, the publisher of these podcasts, and today we have an episode from the archives. You'll be listening to Max Hamrick interview Sandro Calvani. Max, who now works at the World Bank, is a recent graduate from the Harris School of Public Policy. Dr. Calvani is a senior advisor on strategic planning for the Mae Fah Luang Foundation in Thailand. They spoke about international development, how to be a profitable nonprofit, and human cooperation. Apologies for the background noise in the episode. They spoke in a cafe in Bangkok. This episode was originally published last year as part of a podcast series we called Harris Summer Adventures. We're playing it today for two reasons. First, UC3P is growing, and very quickly. We've been training new podcasters, developing new series, and doing the work to make the best podcasts around. But that takes time, so bear with us as we grow. Second, Harris Summer Adventures and another podcast called What If are no longer being produced, so we're consolidating them into this main page so that you can find our content in one place. Thanks for hearing my spiel, and without further ado, here is Max Hamrick with Sandro Calvani.
Hi, I'm Max Hamrick. I'm a student at the Harris School of Public Policy. The interview you're about to hear is part of the series Harris Summer Adventures, brought to you by the University of Chicago Public Policy Podcast. While in Thailand this summer, I reached out to Dr. Sandro Calvani, and we met at a pizzeria in downtown Bangkok. Dr. Calvani has held a variety of director-level positions at the World Health Organization and the United Nations. His last position at the UN was Director of the United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Research Institute, or UNICRI. More recently, he has joined the Mae Fah Luang Foundation as a senior advisor, where he is involved with strategic planning regarding development in northern Thailand. Special thanks to Peter Biava for producing our music, David Raban for editing, and Shirin Raban for providing our artwork. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Sandro Calvani. Okay, Dr. Sandro, it's a pleasure having you here. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk to us. I know you're a very busy man, so really appreciate you coming to speak with us here. So my first question to get into it is, throughout your long career, you've been involved with many different aspects of development, such as poverty, health, disaster relief, crime, corruption, the empowerment of people, and sustainable development. Can you tell us a bit about how you found all of these issues are connected and reinforcing each other? And how can we hope to tackle these complex, interconnected problems and make lasting change?
I wish to thank you for having me, sharing my experience. I've been around the world in 135 countries, most of them in developing nations, and the majority of cases in post-conflict or conflict or natural disaster situations. The major weakness that I found is exactly the one that you briefly mentioned, that the lack of understanding of the complexity and no understanding of the nexus between all subjects. If you observe the major growth of foreign aid and international cooperation in the past decades, you will see that there has been an increasing specialization, like, for example, in the United Nations, the Food and Agriculture Organization in charge of agriculture and forest and fisheries, the World Health Organization in charge of all what is related to health issues, UNESCO and UNICEF in charge of children, women, and educational subjects. Little by little, the world started to tackle the development issues in pieces, thinking that it was possible to put together the various pieces of this global puzzle and, in a way, improving the situation by improving the single pieces. In fact, there are even universities and academic studies around the world which try to establish a kind of priorities. No? First, deal with food. Survival is based on availability of food, nutrition for children, and so on. And then we will deal later with education and maybe public health. Unfortunately, I found out that in the reality of the situation of the villages around the world at the grassroots level, you cannot separate, you cannot divide a human body in pieces. One piece for food, another piece for education, another one for health. All of these issues are connected. And to say the truth, maybe in a way that it is oversimplified, but in a way that everybody understands, I'm now quite convinced that there is not any development of agriculture or development of public health or development of education or economy, society, politics, democracy, so on and so forth. The only possible and sustainable development is development of the people. It is the person who changes his or her mindset toward the future. When a person develops and takes his or her future in their hands, then they develop agriculture, then they develop the economy, and then they develop their own education. So it is the person who develops, and not the expressions of development. And this has been a fundamental break. Many important agencies, some of them also very well funded, like for example the World Bank, the European Foreign Aid Fund. I mean, we are talking about hundreds of billions of US dollars invested in try to eliminate poverty, where, like Ferrari, running the Formula One with the brake, the handbrake, totally on. That means that the capability, the engine was there, the fuel was there, good drivers were there, but there was this fundamental handbrake, which was limiting the capacity of people to understand. So if people are not empowered, whatever aid they receive, it is not their responsibility. It's a good gift from some part of the world. If you instead empower people, like a few experiences I've seen around the world, without any donation, without any grant, not a matter of money, but just changing the mindset of people, people understand that they can change something and the future belongs to them. In that way, the sustainability is guaranteed, because any minor change, be it related to water, to crops, to education, is done by the people for themselves. So in that way, they will go to correct, maybe learn by mistake, but they will go to improve every day. This, I think, is something that finally is becoming well recognized, because only a few examples of sustainable development have shown this characteristic, and the high-level political forum of the United Nations in New York has now recognized that human development is about putting the people at the center of a process of change. Where these things are being done, we see much better, accelerated, and more sustainable development.
And you are currently working as a senior advisor on strategic planning with the Mae Fah Luang Foundation here in Thailand, founded under the royal patronage more than 40 years ago to address poverty, underdevelopment in the Northern Hill Tribe regions. This area is infamous for its involvement in the heroin trade. One of the unique features of this foundation is its multifaceted strategy to addressing issues of poverty, health, education, and environment together, and tailored to fit specific local circumstances. How has this approach been successful at addressing the specific problems people face in this area? And how can this model be applied to other developing regions?
Yes, this has been a very interesting experimentation because the Mae Fah Luang Foundation has started to work in an area in the Golden Triangle, which at that time, at the end of the 60s, the beginning of the 70s, was one of the worst places in the world. It was a stateless area. The people had no citizenship because they are ethnic minorities, so they are not Thai citizens. And it was also the capital of the production of opium, heroin. At the same time, a lot of militia, human trafficking, in a very heavy percentage. Practically every family had sold one girl to human trafficking. Every family was involved in opium trade or opium production, heroin, and all the kind of armed militia which were around were harassing the people. At that time there was no Afghanistan, so all the heroin of Asia was being produced in this part. So the beginning, the situation that the project has encountered was one of the worst possible situations. The beginning was by convincing people that they could own their own future. And the recipe for their own development could be the livelihood. The livelihood means all what makes the life more thrivable, more interesting, more happy. So it is about the community itself. So the people were given the power to decide what form of education in the schools, what kind of production they could choose instead of opium trade. And little by little, people were able to identify agriculture as well as agro-industrial, textile production, other sophisticated handicraft like ceramic of very high quality, which had such a very high value that could easily replace the income from opium. What I think is most interesting of this experiment is that there's been zero grant. So nobody ever gave a penny. As far as I know, around the world, this is the only large development project where there's been no grant, no donation. There has been some investment, in particular by the Japanese International Corporation, as well as some other development funds, but all of them were credits. So the people had to give back the money. And in the lifespan of the project, all the investment has been paid back. So the people know very well that whatever has been done, good and bad, it was done by themselves, not by the project director or by the foreign aid agency. They are in charge of all their achievement as well as of their mistake and their difficulties. In that way, people became development advisors of themselves and became development experts. I remember a professor from China, from the University of Beijing, who visited us a few weeks ago. By interviewing the people, he commented to me, hey, these people might be a PhD, they might be doctor in sustainable development. They never attended any of my classes, he said, but they have learned in the street, in the village, how to make development sustainable. And that, I think, is what most matters in development, knowing what you are doing, understanding your errors and learning from your errors. This process went through 3 different phases. The first one was survival, that means solving the problem of diseases, food for the children. There was a lot of mortality as well as HIV/AIDS. The second level was getting rid of debt, that means creating more sufficiency for the people. And the third phase, the one that we are living now, was the sustainability. So when people have enough money to invest in the education of their children, in creating infrastructures for access to market, and creating skills inside the same village where a person can become a better designer for a kind of high fashion shirt to be sold to some big brand in Europe. Another person could